Hello, good evening. I'm Suzanne Verdi. The capital's knife crime crisis reached number 10 today, with the Prime Minister holding a 3-hour summit to discuss how to stop the violence in London. Theresa May invited 100 experts to the meeting, including London families affected by knife crime and youth workers. Some of those invited to Downing Street, though, told us they were snubbed and didn't get a chance to put their thoughts to the Prime Minister. Our political correspondent, Simon Harris, reports.
In a time of too many murders, too many of them are teenagers.
Jaden Moody, 14 years old.
Jodie is the first teenage girl to be killed in the capital this year.
Ayub Hassan was murdered last night in West Kensington.
Knife crime has claimed 22 lives in London this year. A third of them were in their teens. Today, the Prime Minister held her long-awaited Youth Violence Summit in Downing Street, flanked by London's Mayor.
In the recent months, we know we've seen an appalling number of young lives that have been cut short.
Lorraine Jones, whose son Dwayne was murdered in Brixton 5 years ago, was invited to number 10, but it wasn't what she expected.
Once we got in there, we were segregated into small groups. My groups was communities. I didn't see Theresa May, and they were asking for ideas. I was shocked.
The government's big idea is to make doctors, nurses and teachers responsible for spotting the warning signs among pupils and patients. Mark Prince has campaigned against knife crime since his 15-year-old son was stabbed to death outside a school in North London in 2006. He says he's been making the case for the so-called public health approach for years.
A long time I said this is an epidemic, this is a disease, and you need to treat a disease from the root causes. So it's really sad in 2019, people that we put in charge to tackle these issues have just caught on.
That was echoed in Parliament.
The government committed last October to a public health approach to serious violence, but has taken until today to hold a meeting about it. When will the public health approach be implemented in full, and when will the killing stop?
It is a misrepresentation of the government's position that we have just embarked on the journey of underpinning our strategy through a public health approach. What we've announced today is the launch of a consultation on a statutory duty to cooperate.
The Mayor said it was too early to judge the value of Mrs May's summit.
The key thing is what's going to happen next, what follow-throughs they're going to be. What I'd like to see is for her to every week chair a meeting of all the key people, knock heads together and demand action. If there isn't action, ask why. If there's a need for resources, to give those resources. Not in autumn, not next year, now.
Tonight, Lorraine Jones said Downing Street had called to apologise and to promise her a fresh meeting. Simon Harris, ITV News.
Good evening. People living in Edmonton have told ITV News they are scared and confused after yet another stabbing there this morning. A man in his 30s was knifed in the back in the early hours. He is the 5th person to be stabbed randomly in Edmonton. 4 other people were attacked on Saturday and Sunday. Well, just to indicate to you how close these stabbings have been, the victim this morning apparently stumbled to a police cordon, which was already in place from one of the attacks on the weekend. From Edmonton, our correspondent Simon Harris reports.
5 stabbings in 4 days, random, unprovoked attacks just streets apart. The latest victim, a man in his 30s, is critically ill in hospital. Today, people living in Edmonton had just one question. Is there a knife-wielding maniac targeting their community?
You just can't walk the streets. It puts the fear into you, really. You know, I want to go shopping and I can't go shopping because things have happened. It's just mind-blowing, really, what's been going on.
I do feel unsafe, to be honest. I mean, just the other day I was out and about. I wanted to go to the park in the evening with my daughter, but now I don't want to go out anymore. It's just not safe anymore.
The attacks began on Saturday evening and continued through the early hours of Sunday morning. By late morning, 4 people had been stabbed before the 5th victim today. Local people were understandably scared, but also baffled by a lack of information. Were the stabbings carried out by the same man? Was he still on the loose? It wasn't clear. The arrest of 2 suspects after the weekend attacks did nothing to reassure people.
So right now, we don't know what's going on. All we know is that they have 2 suspects right now. and we're not sure even whether or not that's the guy who did it. So for all we know, he could still be out loose on the streets of Edmonton.
Like her neighbours, Chantel Michael didn't know what to think as news emerged of a third arrest.
You don't know if they've caught the person, the right person. They've arrested 2 people over the weekend, and now they're saying there's a third one that's been arrested. Is it the right person? No one knows until they've caught the right person, and then it's just not safe.
This afternoon, the police confirmed what most people here suspected. The stabbings were potentially the work of one man. So why weren't people warned?
You must understand, we have to take an open-minded approach to 5 separate incidents. If we were to move too quickly to say this is definitely one suspect and then fail to follow reasonable lines of inquiry that might take us somewhere else, that would be remiss.
Tonight, a man in his 30s is being held on suspicion of causing grievous bodily harm. The police are still advising people in Edmonton to be vigilant.
Oh, Simon, a community naturally worried. Can they feel reassured tonight?
Well, as a rule, the police don't give much away about their investigations. They certainly don't give a running commentary. So the best local people can do is draw their own conclusions from what information they do have. And most prominently tonight, that is the warning from the police to be vigilant. Even though there has been an arrest today, I don't think that gives the reassurance that the people of Edmonton particularly want just yet. As for whether this is the work of one attacker, well, the police say potentially yes. It is interesting to note that the description issued of the man suspected of carrying out today's attack, a skinny black man wearing a hoodie, tall black man wearing a hoodie, is almost identical to the description of the suspect thought to be responsible for the attacks at the weekend.
All right, Simon, thank you. Before that, it's time to hold your breath again over Crossrail. There was more talk today of it being delayed, not till next year, but until 2021. The concern came from the Public Accounts Committee. The cross-party group of MPs urged the government to explain to passengers just why London's new rail route is so late and so over budget. Our political correspondent Simon Harris is outside one of Crossrail's stations for us this evening. Take us through exactly what was said, Simon.
Nina, with Crossrail's woeful failure to open on time, this investigation by MPs was never going to produce a glowing report, and sure enough, the Department for Transport gets a good pasting. Remember, Crossrail is a joint project between the DfT and Crossrail Limited, which in turn is part of Transport for London. And the MPs say both organisations were far too casual. They had an unacceptably laissez-faire attitude. Key warning signs were missed or ignored, and they were unable to explain how the project unravelled. The investigation was by the Commons Public Accounts Committee, which is chaired by the Hackney MP, Meg Hillier. She says passengers were let down by a lack of control.
If it were me, I would have been asking a lot of questions along the way, because these big projects at certain points have certain risks, and you need to be checking what's happening and that those risks are being dealt with. What happened was that the Crossrail team leaders were brought in last summer to the department and asked to assure the department that it was all fine, and they said it was, and it was only a couple of months later that everything became apparent.
Simon, what's the government said in response to today's criticism?
Well, the DfT absolutely rejects the suggestion that it was casual, and says that both it and TfL acted swiftly to learn lessons and change the management after it all went wrong. The MPs, as you said, are not convinced the railway will be ready even in time to open in 2020. The new boss says he's hoping to come up with a window for the railway's opening sometime this month. It might be 2020, it might be 2021. The longer we wait, Nina, the more it costs.
Simon Harris, thank you.
Now, a new party boat that's longer than a jumbo jet looks likely to soon be cruising down the Thames. The Ocean Diva, that's its name, its late-night trips will host as many as 1,500 people, nearly 3 times bigger than similar boats which already operate. Its owners are close to securing the final approval, but there are already some complaints about noise and pollution. So, is it suitable for our river? Our correspondent Simon Harris reports.
Clubbing Amsterdam style, and it's heading for London. This is the Ocean Diva, a giant party boat with room for 1,500 people. Now the Dutch owners are hoping to launch a sister ship on the Thames, Ocean Diva London. These floating nightclubs are 300 feet long. The British one will be the biggest vessel of its kind on the river. London businessman Greg Lawson is steering the project through planning permission and is trying not to make waves.
The vessel is fantastic because the way it's built means that the acoustics are great inside, but even if we were standing here, we would only just hear the music if there was music on. If it was here, on the other side of the river, you'll hear very little. In fact, I'm sure you wouldn't hear a thing.
The Thames has always been a working river. Party boats are nothing new, but Ocean Diva is so big it needs a new pier, likely to be built on the site of an old one next to London Bridge. The launch of the Ocean Diva in London might not be plain sailing. This is where the boat will dock to take on passengers, and some people living on the opposite bank are far from happy. Susan Rich lives by the river. Amir Eden chairs a residents group. They're worried about pollution from the boat's engines and how a floating nightclub will change the river.
This massive ship is going to have 1,500 people coming on and off the boat, and that is going to have massive impacts in terms of noise pollution, but also in terms of environmental issues, because those people are going to be drinking, they're going to be dropping their litter, they're going to be doing all sorts of things, which is just not conducive to the health of this area.
I think the problem with this particular large sort of football pitch-sized boat is it's setting a precedent. It's like a Trojan horse. You bring one of these in, you're going to see a lot more in. And again, we're concerned about the destruction of the amenity for everybody else in London, visitors, residents, tourists alike.
These are the design plans for Ocean Diva London. It will also host corporate events and dinners catering for 700 guests, making it a multi-purpose floating venue.
As someone who's been involved in live music for 40 years now, I think that anything that promotes the nighttime economy, anything that brings people out, makes people aware of stuff going on in London, is great.
If the planners give the new pier the go-ahead, the new party boat is expected to set sail next summer. Simon Harris, ITV News, on the river.
The biggest shake-up on the capital's roads since the congestion charge is now just a weekend away. It'll mean big changes or charges for businesses around London, as our political correspondent Simon Harris explains.
In a West London warehouse, business is rubbish, literally. The company handles 60,000 tonnes of waste every year. These are the contents from rubbish bins in thousands of London offices, and it all has to be collected by lorry. The company has just upgraded its fleet to ensure the diesel engines are clean enough to enter London's ultra-low emission zone without paying. It's cost £3 million, and the firm says it had no choice.
There's a reputational cost. We're an environmental business and we wouldn't have been compliant, but also the operational costs of £100 per vehicle per day, and we have 74 trucks operating in London, so very costly.
The ultra-low emission zone starts on Monday and covers the same area as the congestion charge. There's a £12.50 charge for any car which doesn't meet the latest emissions standards. There's going to be an extension to the zone in 2021 to include every road inside the north and south circulars. Drivers who fail to pay the charge will be fined.
You've got 24 hours to actually pay, but if you don't pay, you're liable to a penalty charge notice of £160, and you get 50% off that if you pay for the first 2 weeks. Our aim is not to raise revenue out of this. Our aim is to improve the quality of London's air.
But business leaders say many small firms don't realise or aren't ready. They want TfL to allow an amnesty.
They need to be working with them a soft launch, a period of grace whereby if they have fallen foul, they've got that time to change the vehicles.
It might be the biggest revolution to hit London's roads in more than a decade, but the ultra-low emission zone will arrive quietly and without fanfare at midnight on Sunday. Some drivers may be caught out. Unlike the congestion charge, the ultra-low emission zone will be in force all day and every day. And from Monday, thousands of drivers will have to pay both. Simon Harris, ITV News, Piccadilly.
The biggest change to the capital's road since the congestion charge is now just a weekend away. Do you know what the ULEZ is and whether you'll be charged for driving into central London? From Monday, it'll cost £24 to use the most polluting vehicles in central London. It's to cut down on the toxic fumes we breathe in. But businesses are concerned about the cost to them of the ultra-low emission zone. Our political correspondent Simon Harris is on the edge of it tonight, just over 48 hours away, and still lots of confusion, Simon.
Yes, Nina, unlike the congestion charge, the ultra-low emission zone will operate all day and every day. And from Monday, thousands of drivers face having to pay both. the old charge of £11.50 plus the new charge. It means many Londoners and businesses face an expensive choice: buy greener vehicles or pay up. In a West London warehouse, business is rubbish, literally. The company handles 60,000 tonnes of waste every year. These are the contents from rubbish bins in thousands of London offices, and it all has to be collected by lorry. The company has just upgraded its fleet to ensure the diesel engines are clean enough to enter London's ultra-low emission zone without paying. It's cost £3 million, and the firm says it had no choice.
There's a reputational cost. We're an environmental business and we wouldn't have been compliant, but also the operational costs of £100 per vehicle per day, and we have 74 trucks operating in London, so very costly.
The ultra-low emission zone starts on Monday and covers the same area as the congestion charge. There's a £12.50 charge for any car which doesn't meet the latest emissions standards. There's going to be an extension to the zone in 2021 to include every road inside the north and south circulars. Drivers who fail to pay the charge will be fined.
If you don't pay, you've got 24 hours to actually pay, but if you don't pay, you're liable to a penalty charge notice of £160, and you get 50% off that if you pay for the first 2 weeks. Our aim is not to raise revenue out of this, our aim is to improve the quality of London's air.
But business leaders say many small firms don't realise or aren't ready. They want TfL to allow an amnesty.
They need to be working with them a soft launch, a period of grace whereby if they have fallen foul, they've got that time to change the vehicles.
The new rules don't just affect cars, vans, lorries and buses. Motorbikes are included, and for some owners there's a problem. Older bikes were made before exhaust emissions were recorded, so they need to be tested at a cost of £175 at this workshop in Bow.
If the bike then complies, they'll be granted exemption by TfL after we upload the data.
But there's a cost?
There is a cost, and it's £175 for the test and the upload to TfL.
It might be the biggest revolution to hit London's roads in more than a decade, but the ultra-low emission zone will arrive quietly and without fanfare at midnight on Sunday. Some drivers may be caught out. Behind the ULEZ, of course, is London's toxic air crisis. The Mayor, Sadiq Khan, has made tackling pollution one of his flagship policies. New figures from City Hall today suggest 1,000 patients a year are admitted to hospital in London with asthma and serious lung complaints. Transport for London predicts that the ULEZ will help cut harmful nitrogen oxide emissions from traffic by almost a half.
Simon Harris, thank you.